Hey everyone, my name is Gunther and welcome back to Ottawa Zoo. Now in today's episode, we are taking a pretty rough looking bison habitat from this all the way to this. Now I will say this was probably my most challenging remake yet, but using some new techniques and with a lot of help from our community, I think we've built something pretty fantastic. Now as always, if you would like to, feel free to leave a comment, drop a like, or even subscribe. But just remember, no pressure. Now, like all of our past remakes, we started fresh. I removed everything that was in the original habitat, and it was time for us to start making something new. And in this case, I wanted to start off with something that I've never built before, which is going to be a whole new mountain. Now, it's surprisingly easy to make a mountain, which really all it takes is just your stamping tool. Pivot it around every few times, so you don't really want to have straight lines, and then you use the flatten tool and you just drag it down, and you get these really cool shapes that create this really awesome mountain. And I've never made this before, and this was my first time attempting this, and I gotta say, I'm really impressed with what I was able to create, and I think it's going to become the iconic feature of our new habitat. Now, on top of that, I also wanted to build another man-made structure that we can add into our habitat. We started this with our beaver, which we had the cottage, and then our timber wolves had that really awesome fire watch, and I decided to build an old barn. And I really built this because every photo I saw of a bison in their natural habitat, for some reason, had a barn in the background. So I utilized some of the Arctic wood pieces, which got this really rustic looking barn shape, and then added some additional outcroppings on the side just to break it up so it wasn't just one square box, and created this really interesting looking style barn. Now, of course, this is just our frame, and we're gonna add quite a bit of additional work to the barn to make it kind of fit. So once the barn was somewhat completed, I moved it to where I really wanted to have it, which is just on the left-hand side of the habitat, and then started work on our fence. So originally, in our first bison habitat build, I had sunk the entire habitat into the ground, and the idea behind this was to utilize some rocks to create this natural barrier. Didn't really look that good, and you saw it in that before photo. It was pretty rough looking, so I wanted to create this new fence that would really combine some old barn architecture with more modern style fencing. In the end, I couldn't actually find something that would work. I actually played around a little bit with these wood pieces from the African pack, and I just really didn't like what I was going with, and I ended up going with just all modern wood beams. And I'm pretty sad about that, but at the same time, I think this is the joy of playing Planet Zoo, is having this really cool idea and then trying to make it work with what you have. Regardless, I'm very happy with what we accomplished in terms of a new custom fence. It's always fun making a whole new fence. And I started placing it along the perimeter of where I was going to have our habitat. Then I kind of realized this is going to be a really long fence, and nobody just wants to look at miles of fencing, because this is one of our largest habitats to date. So I tried to break it up, and I felt the easiest way to do this was to create some rock outcroppings. And I utilized a technique that I learned quite some time ago, and you actually saw this in practice in our timberwolf habitat, which is really just utilizing the stamping tool to create a block of land that we're going to layer with our rocks, and then I pulled through some ground, and then once I was done that, I really just painted it. The entire idea of doing this just helps to create more natural formations, and I actually have quite a few of these. I actually ended up building 3 of them to break up all of our fence lines. Now, with our fence in place, our barn where we really want it to be, it's time for us to start working on our foliage. And what better place than to start with our mountaintop backdrop? Now, I've never built a mountain before. I want to preface this by saying that. And this is my first attempt at doing it, and I'm pretty shocked with how it turned out. And I kind of utilize that same technique that we talked about in the timberwolf habitat, which is I like to stick with one piece of foliage, place it everywhere, and then move on to the next one. And really the reason why I like doing this is it helps to create a more random looking environment. I've always found that when I focus on kind of creating the ideal placement from a foliage perspective, I get lost in trying to make everything look perfect, and then when I take a step back, it doesn't look perfect. And it bothers me so much that I end up going back and redoing it all over again. So this new technique is something that I think works to alleviate some of my anxiety when it comes to placing all of this foliage, and it actually works pretty well. So with our mountaintop coming together, let's talk a little bit about the rest of the habitat. So off screen, I ended up adding in some additional rock shelves in the middle of the habitat. This helps to break up the large open space, as well as a river. And I know we utilized the river in the timberwolf habitat, but I actually like how it turns out. Now, the downside of placing foliage is that you may think you're going to go too heavy. You're going to place too much, it's going to look really bad, it's not ideal. And I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. I think this is a prime example of what happens when you think you go too heavy on foliage, and then when you take a step back, it looks significantly better. So playing Planet Zoo is always about learning new techniques and becoming better. And this is actually something I kind of picked up from our last build, the Timberwolf habitat. So I talk a lot about the Timberwolf habitat, more so because I tried a lot of new techniques in that one, and this is transitioning over into this habitat. And there's something I forgot to do in the Timberwolf habitat, and I did it after the fact, and it kind of shows, which is rock placement. I really tried to be very conservative when it came to placing rocks, and now I'm going a little bit on the other side, being a little bit more liberal with it. And you can definitely see it to start to come back together. I will say the one mistake obviously was tying these giant rocks in with the smaller rocks, because when you lower them into the ground, they definitely look a little different. But we went from something that was pretty jarring looking, did not look that great, and then once we've started to feather everything in, it really changed how it looks. So don't ever think that you're going to place too much foliage, because there's no such thing. Because sometimes you'll have this amazing idea in the back of your head, and you need to see it through to find out how it looks. And that applies to our buffalo grass as well. We're placing down a lot of buffalo grass, but as soon as you lower it into the ground, you're going to get something that's going to look super unique. And if you want to take it to the next level, all you have to do is just layer on some additional foliage like so. So if you feel that your habitat foliage is just not looking so great, that's okay. Take another piece, layer it on, and see what it looks like after the fact. Try to go for that random look. Don't focus on creating that perfect foliage piece. Just place it down and move on to the next one. And then layer on top of that to get something that's going to be truly unique, and it's going to fit really well. You'll be surprised with what you can build. Now, with the majority of our foliage placed down, it's time to turn back to our barn. Now, this was the barn that we built at the very beginning of the episode, because really I just needed to know what it was going to look like and how we could incorporate it into the exterior view. And now it's time to work on the interior. And it's really funny considering we would never actually normally go back here when we're looking at Planet Zoo, but there's just something that is so gratifying when you build an interior area that you have to build it, you enjoy it, and that's really what's happening here. We're never really going to go tour this backspace, but on the flip side, I just really wanted to do this. You can't go wrong with that. So I utilized some of the wood floor pieces, in this case the roof pieces, lowered them down to the floor, and then placed some hay on top of it and created all these paddocks. Now, of course, sometimes you're going to get that pesky ground that's going to stick through, and the trick that I picked up from our Discord is you just place a path piece down and then place whatever you want on top of it. That's going to stop your terraforming from happening, and then you can place to your heart's content and you're not going to have to worry about anything. So with the majority of the required stuff placed down, it's time to spruce the place up with some really cool, unique features, and the first one is going to be this grazing box. Now, I've quickly learned if you want to know how to build something really cool, download something from your workshop and then pull it apart and see the tools or the pieces that they use to build it all. And you'd be pretty amazed by the ingenious use of some of these items. And the perfect example was going to be this signpost plate. You can do so much with this plate. I heard about it in the Discord. I actually saw a build recently. It was one of the sign pieces that I downloaded from the workshop. It's pretty amazing what people can put together. And if you ever want to get to that point, I encourage you, download something from the workshop and rip it all apart. So with that being said, I finished building our feed boxes, and then I added in some additional shelving units and some conservation pieces before moving on to this A-frame. Now, I agonized over this A-frame. I think I built it 3 or 4 times, and I learned something. There's an easy way to build it, which is you build 1 or 2 pieces and then you copy it. And don't be like me when you start first building and build each thing individually. It's the worst use of your time. So please learn from my mistake and build one example of it and then just copy it all the way across. And it works so well. So with our framing finally completed and now supporting the roof, it's time to move on to creating this new enrichment item, which is really just a hanging feeder for all of our buffalo. And it's made with using some pretty easy pieces, which is really just the African hanging basket, a chain, and then some dried grass to give it the look of hay. And just acts as a new enrichment item for them to utilize so they can forage their food from different places while they're sheltering at night, and that's really the key. Now everything's finally coming together, although I will say we're going to continue to utilize that technique with the pathing to make sure that we're not doing any terrain terraforming after the fact, because we've spent so much time in creating this amazing habitat, and we're ending up with this final finished piece. Now, of course, there's a few things that didn't make the build. things that you would have seen in the past, things that are being built on the outside of the habitat that are really just tying it all together. But don't worry about it. You're actually going to see this as part of our live tour. So hang on and you can see some pretty amazing things built in our new bison habitat. I really do love doing live tours of all the work you've completed after building something, and it just gives you a whole new way of looking at your zoo, and it allows you to see the little things that kind of make all the smaller details happen. Now, of course, we're not only here to hear me talk about why I like to do live tours, but I do want to acknowledge our Wolf Valley, our Timber Wolf Valley. Now, in the last episode, I did say that I would rename it to the comments. I would take a look at some of the comments and stuff like that. And the new name for Timber Wolf Valley is going to be Wolf Firewatch, which I love the incorporation of the Firewatch Tower. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build a nameplate for it, and I'm going to place it on both ends of the bridge here. I love that name, so keep it up and thank you so much. Now, of course, our bison habitat never actually had a name associated with it. So if you have a name for our new bison habitat, put it in the comments below, or if you're part of the Discord, share it there, either or, and let me know. And the best name out there, or the top name out there, is going to have their name immortalized in Ottawa Zoo. Now, of course, as we approach our bison habitat, we have our first education sign, which is really just for the bison, and it's pretty plain. We've kind of seen these things before, although I did stumble across this New World leaf that I actually really like. It's kind of like it's like a maple wood leaf. It's not a maple leaf, but it's like made from maple wood almost, which is kind of interesting to articulate. But I'm pretty happy with this. I actually think it actually fits in the entire build, especially with this like little roof that we have kind of hanging over it. I love the way this looks. Now, as we kind of make our way to the rest of the habitat, we have some pretty basic sunshades set up, which is really just some timber. And I think it fits with the entire build because we really just want to have timber everywhere. And I think it looks really cool. Now, I'm going to stop right here because there's a few things to kind of take a look in. Now, we are going to walk through the habitat itself as well. And the reason why is because there's some other details I want to kind of take a look at in the very back. But I love this little campsite that we have set up right here. And there's a story behind that campsite. So I'm going to share it with you guys when we get closer. I'm really excited about that. Now we have 5 bison in our habitat, so we're starting a new herd. We have Yeoman, which is our bull, because we can only have one male in our bison pack. And then we have Aurora, Bianca, Welsie, and Brenly. And so we are hoping to start a whole new bison herd, and that's going to be the start of it. And I think that's actually going to be Yeoman way off in the distance, with the much larger fella way back there. But I gotta say, I love these rock outcroppings. They look really cool, much more natural. I think probably one of the best things I've ever made, just kind of creating these offshoots. It's almost like we're in the Rockies and you're seeing them like kind of like stick through the ground. It looks really cool. And of course we have that mountain backdrop. You kind of, as I zoom in, you can kind of see, I did go through and add some rocks on all the rocky areas just to add some additional texture and stuff like that. And I gotta say, it looks absolutely amazing. I'm really happy with what we've achieved here. Now, as we kind of wander around, you're going to notice something, and I'm going to apologize in advance. We have our staff area, which looks pretty terrible now that we're kind of going out and rebuilding everything. So we hope to rebuild this staff area soon. I think it's time that we give this a little bit of a facelift, and I maybe kind of cut this area off from staff or pedestrian access. For those who remember, we actually built the staff area, and the idea was it was going to be like an education zone. People could kind of walk through here and visit the inside of the building. In hindsight, not the best idea, and the building, it did work out, but it could have been a lot better. But of course, we're going to come up to the exterior of our habitat. Oh, we have some paraphernalia just hanging out over there, but we're going to ignore that. And we're going to enter into our habitat, and we have a few things. So we have our preparation board. There's going to be a lot of maintenance because this is such a large habitat. So we, of course, need to make sure that we have all the tools necessary, which we do, all the landscaping tools. And then we have some additional stuff, and there's a little issue with some floating oranges, but we have some fruit, boxes, some grain, and then some other things kind of hanging out here ready to be used. And then, of course, we have our hanging feeders, our ground feeders, and all the hay. Now, really interestingly, you have to be careful when it comes to having like hoofstock on top of like hard floors and then and like the bed and then going out into the wilderness. They can actually be really bad for their hoofs. So you would always want to have like regular checkups on like how their hoofs are growing, if they're kind of like twisting or anything like that, because it can cause a lot of pain for our bison if we're not too careful. Now, I do love this fence. Now, this fence actually was an idea from that Aussie bloke who was in our Discord. It was actually originally recommended for our dingo habitat, but I love the idea of kind of creating a fence, and it made it look like the bison have just escaped from their farm and they're now out in the wilderness and they're out here kind of just wandering around. I think it works really well with the entire idea of creating this like natural environment. So I'm really happy with how that works. Now, as we kind of wander through, we have some rock outcroppings, and we have all the rocks in the ground, and it actually worked really well. It did take a little bit to get it to kind of work correctly, but we are finally there. And then I also added in another bridge, more so because our staff couldn't make it to the other side. So I was worried about them not being able to go over there to clean up anything. So I did add in another little bridge. Now, as we kind of roll around, we're going to see this campsite. Now, my idea is that this area was originally a gold mine. So I've kind of built like a little tunnel, and it's been flooded. That's where the water's kind of coming from. But there was a tunnel. We're gonna go take a look at that shortly. But maybe there's a prospector over here, and he was prospecting for some gold and stuff like that. He has like his little fire pit going on, and his little shovel and some stuff ready to go. So I thought that was a pretty cool small detail I'm really happy about. And then as we kind of wander through over here, you can actually, if you look really closely, you can see an old railway. So I added in this really quick rail track, and it's almost like this was a mine that had collapsed. That's why you can't get in anymore. It's been shut down. But maybe they would have had some mine carts kind of coming through here, and we ripped it all up, and then we flooded the path to kind of create a more natural environment. So pretty happy with that. And then of course, we can kind of get a better look at all the foliage. Now I did go through and add in some long grass everywhere, and it actually kind of fits really well. But I'm really happy again with everything. And I know I say that a lot, but part of playing Planet Zoo is to bring joy to all that you build. And this brings me joy in building something that's so cool. And I would love to be able to visit something like this in real life. Now, as we kind of look at the exterior of our barn, we have a barn door on the side. So we could say, maybe perhaps this barn was original to the area, and we're just utilizing it for our purposes. We have like a little door on the side, and then we have this sliding door that we can kind of move over. So at night, if we want to have the bison shelter inside, we can kind of lock them in here. Now I did add like a little rope so that it's nothing too fancy. This is just you slide it shut, and then you just wrap the rope around the two handles, and that's how it kind of stays there. But this is the end of our live tour. It's surprising because it took like 7 hours to build this, and we condensed everything down to a less than 20-minute video, which is kind of sad, but kind of good at the same time. Of course, if you really like this video, guys, feel free to leave a comment or subscribe. It really does help the channel, but I do want to stress there's no pressure. You do what you want to do, and if you don't want to subscribe, that's totally cool. I do hope you continue to watch the content. It does let me know I'm doing a good job, and I really do appreciate it. Now, if you are new to Planet Zoo, or if you really enjoy what you're seeing here, you're really happy with the community, feel free to join our Discord. There's going to be a link into the description, and our Discord is always open to new people, especially new Planet Zoo players. If you want to learn some new techniques, and maybe you just want to ask for some advice or anything like that, anybody and everybody is welcome to join. Other than that, I just want to say thank you so much for all the support, all the kind words for my builds. I can definitely say I'm getting a lot better at this game. From our first bison habitat to this bison habitat, I think this goes just really show the level of detail and the skills, and it's something that anybody can do. And I was really worried about starting this entire series, and I gotta say it's definitely paid off. Other than that, I just want to say ciao to everybody and talk to you guys all soon.